The valley was burning. Black smoke clawed its way into the sky as explosions shook the ground like thunder. 4 dozen soldiers sprinted across the dirt, their boots pounding toward the only escape left, a narrow steel bridge stretched across a raging river. But then it happened. The grinding roar of engines. Not friendly, not reinforcements. Enemy tanks. Rolling out of the smoke, their barrels aimed straight at the retreating men. The commander raised the detonator. One click, and the bridge would fall. One click, and they'd all survive. But when his thumb pressed down, nothing happened. Just a faint spark, and then silence. And in that terrible moment, every man knew they were trapped, until one soldier stepped forward. Silent, determined, without waiting for orders, he ran back toward the fire. Act 1, the retreat. The mission had started like so many others, a sweep through enemy-controlled valley terrain, search for armored columns, collect intel, report back, but everything had gone wrong. The ambush hit them just after dawn. Mortars rained down from hidden ridgelines. Trucks mounted with heavy guns poured fire into their convoy. Drones circled above, feeding enemy eyes every move they made. Within minutes, half the unit was down, radios jammed, ammunition running low. The commander gave the only order left: fall back, head for extraction point Charlie, move. And so they ran. Through smoke and dust, carrying wounded brothers, firing blind at shadows on the ridges. Every step bought them a few more seconds of life. The extraction point was beyond the valley, across the river, and the only path, the old iron bridge. That's when Sergeant Daniel Cross came into focus. Not the kind of man people noticed at first. He was quiet, serious, no flashy medals on his chest, no speeches, no swagger. He just did his job. The kind of soldier who carried more than his share without complaint. As they reached the last ridge before the river, Daniel glanced back. He saw the smoke rising higher, the ground trembling from the weight of steel tracks rolling closer. And deep in his gut, he knew. They weren't out of this yet. Act 2, the trap. For the bridge came into view at last. Rusted steel beams, wooden planks scorched from years of war. It swayed slightly above the rushing black river below. But it was their salvation. Their engineers had rigged it earlier in the campaign, loaded with explosives. Detonator in hand, the commander had only to press a button and the bridge would collapse, cutting off pursuit. As the squad pushed onto the far side, relief began to creep in. They were almost there. Then came the sound. Engines. Dozens of them. The grinding thunder of tanks and armored vehicles echoing through the valley. A scout shouted, pointing, and there, out of the haze, they appeared. Enemy armor columns, trucks, carriers, infantry swarming like ants behind them. The commander didn't hesitate. He raised the detonator and pressed. But the explosion never came. Instead, a faint spark fizzled out. The circuit had failed. The charges hadn't armed correctly. And in that instant, the truth crashed over every man on that bridge. They were trapped, no charges, no cover, and a steel tide of armor rolling straight at them. Panic erupted. Some shouted to retreat further. Others cursed the engineers. A few gripped their rifles with shaking hands, knowing how useless they'd be against tanks. And then through the chaos, a voice cut clear. Someone has to stay. Act 3, the stand, 8:13. It was Daniel Cross. He stepped forward, calm, like he had already made peace with the choice. We don't have time to argue. They'll be here in minutes. Someone has to hold them. Someone has to finish what the detonator couldn't. The commander barked back. That's suicide. Daniel's eyes didn't waver. It's survival. For the rest of you. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a spare detonator, slung his rifle, and sprinted back toward the bridge. The others froze, stunned, watching one man run toward the storm. The tanks rolled closer, infantry spreading out, their rifles flashing. Bullets sparked off steel beams around Daniel as he dropped low, firing short bursts to buy himself seconds. He crawled under the structure, fumbling with wires, reconnecting charges by hand. Sparks lit beneath the bridge as he twisted frayed cables together. Sweat and blood dripping into the river below. A tank shell slammed into the ground nearby, the blast hurling him against the beams. His ears rang, his chest burned, but his hands never stopped moving. On the radio, the commander's voice cracked with desperation. "Cross! Get back here! That's an order!" Daniel pressed his transmitter, breathing hard. Not until the job's done. More infantry stormed onto the bridge. Daniel fought them in brutal close combat, rifle empty, switching to his sidearm. When that ran dry, he drew his knife. The bridge became a storm of steel, smoke, and blood. But through it all, he kept one hand near the charges. One goal, one purpose. Act 4, the last push. The tanks were almost on him now. Their barrels lowered, their tracks crushing the earth. Daniel staggered, bleeding, nearly spent. But the charges were finally set, the wires connected. The manual trigger clutched in his fist. A shell screamed past, tearing through the far side of the bridge. Steel beams buckled. Daniel was thrown to his knees. Through the smoke, the squad saw him, a lone figure silhouetted against fire and chaos. He raised the radio one last time, his voice steady despite the storm. Now, and then he pressed the trigger. The valley erupted. A chain of fire ripped across the bridge, detonations echoing like rolling thunder. Steel twisted, beams snapped, and the entire structure collapsed into the churning river below. Enemy tanks plunged with it, swallowed by water and fire. Infantry screamed as the ground gave way beneath them. The air filled with smoke, flame, and silence. On the far bank, the squad stood frozen, watching the inferno consume the valley. Act 5, Legacy. 16. When the smoke cleared, the bridge was gone. So was Daniel Cross. But his squad lived. Every last one of them had made it across because he had stayed behind. Extraction helicopters roared, and minutes later, blades chopping the air. The soldiers were pulled aboard, battered and broken, but alive. The commander sat in silence, helmet in his lap, staring at the burning river below. His voice cracked as he whispered, "He bought us our tomorrow." Back at base, reports filed, medals handed out, but nothing could erase the image of one soldier standing alone on that bridge. Daniel Cross. Not the loudest, not the strongest, not the man anyone expected to be a hero. Just the man who refused to let others die while he could still act. Closing narration, 1830. History often remembers battles, victories, generals, but sometimes the greatest story is of the one soldier who stood when everyone else had to leave. The bridge is gone now, swallowed by fire and water, but the memory remains, because one man, Sergeant Daniel Cross, proved that sometimes one soldier really can save the day, and his name will live on. Not in medals, not in monuments, but in the lives of the men he saved.